Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, and I would like to, first of all, thank the organizer for Kadin Indonesia, and then for PwC, Global Initiatives, and other organizers that have invited me to deliver the speech this morning. Pak Bayu Krishnamurti, the Vice Minister of Trade, Pak Suryo Bambang Sulisto, Excellencies, Ambassadors, and many business leaders, and also leaders from civil society organizations and media. When I look at the topic, looking at the overall B4E Indonesia Summit 2013, I think for Indonesia, it's not just a voluntarily option and decision to be part of this global undertaking. For a country that has 250 million population and one of the most vibrant and open democracy, where everybody speaks out, expressing their view, their concerns, their complaints, their frustrations, sustainable development, sustainable investment, and overall activities that would support the sustainability of the growth itself is not just a choice. It's not just an option. It is a must. I think we have to understand that. Unless your business model, business supply chain, business activities are very much in accordance to the globally and nationally recognized sustainable business practices, then I think it's just a matter of time that you will not last for too long in a country like Indonesia. And I think I would like to introduce this way of thinking while we are at the same time taking part of the global undertaking of global initiatives in discussing many aspects of green growth, green economy. Because it is so much like what Tony indicated earlier, referring to the situation of the multilateral negotiation, where people look at that with what he said, increasingly pessimistic and depressing view. Let us not be contained by that situation as of that is everything about sustainable development. Because the real sustainable development challenge is the one that we face in the day-to-day, daily activities in our business, in our government operation, in our civil society activities, and so on and so on. And that is, I think, the biggest possible and most relevant, leading by example, contribution of Indonesia. If we understand that big picture, then individually we can share our thinking, our concept, our initiatives, and our vision, and even dreams to enrich not only the discussion, not only the conceptual thinking, but more importantly, to the concrete deliverables that are now much needed rather than just an issue of negotiation and conceptual thinking. Because if you have the accountability and credentials of such deliverables, then you will be looking at a much more doable, long-lasting, sustainable development in its real implementation. This is why I think, again, we in Indonesia are not only willing and want to be part of it, for us, it's a must. It's the other side of the coin of the third largest and most vibrant democracy in the world. There's no other option. Now, with that in mind, let me give you some views on how the investment side can also contribute to the discussion. Indonesia's investment realization figure in the last quarter, which consists of the July to September of 2013, has reached the record high ever, overpassing 100 trillion rupiah for both domestic and international investments. It has never achieved or overpassing 100 trillion mark. The second important element to that figure is that for the first time, the ratio between national or domestic investment to international investor or investment is 1:2. We had 33.5 trillion investment from national companies and 67 trillion from international companies. But if you look closer within the international companies, of course, some of them, as part of the joint venture parties, would also have Indonesian investors' contribution. And in many instances, these international investments or companies are also owned directly or indirectly by Indonesians that have registered their companies in Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur, in Hong Kong, or in many others, for many reasons. So if you combine this, I think easily 40%, if not more, of the total investment in Indonesia are by Indonesians. That is one recent development. The other one is that in the past, let's say 6 to 10 years ago, the biggest interest for investors, let that be domestic and international, would be in the primary sector, namely agriculture, and that includes, of course, plantation, and mining. But more recently, we see that for international investors, the bulk of the investment go to manufacturing, which then, looking at the possibilities utilizing Indonesian growing domestic market and young, dynamic middle-income group that many people think would continue growing at least for another decade or even 2 decades from now due to the demographic bonus that we have. But for domestic investors, it's even more interesting. Not only it has moved from primary sector to secondary sector to manufacturing, now the largest investment for domestic investors are in services. So you see, it's very fascinating development in Indonesia. And if you look at the size of our investment now, I would call the level that we have now is sustainable at high level. Because investment has contributed to about 1/3 of Indonesia's GDP, which makes the GDP growth in itself sustainable. Because unlike in the past, it was merely driven in the beginning by consumption and then by government expenditure, but now by investment and at the high and sustainable level. So as a model, Indonesian economic growth from the perspective of economic structure, from the perspective of growing middle income group that would last for another 2 decades is sustainable. But then, let us match that with the issue of sustainable development, of green economy, of green growth. So it will also become a sustainable and a green growth of economic model. And this is where I think the meeting like today is very important to identify not only Indonesia's contribution to the global multilateral discussion on the green economy, on the climate change, and many others, which unfortunately face not too encouraging development, but make that more relevant to Indonesia's day-to-day situation that is offering the possibilities of developing a framework, a model that would fit in with individual sector, individual industry, within the big picture of sustainable economic growth. That would be the biggest possible contribution that Indonesia can make. Because then, not only we contribute the leading by example, sustainable model of economic growth, but at the same time, we can share with others how such model be possible in the most challenging situation, which is, of course, from political perspective, is an infant or maturing democracy. That would be the ultimate challenge. Sustainable development for advanced nations is a challenge. Sustainable development for developing countries is a challenge. But sustainable development for 250 million young and vibrant democracy in the world is the ultimate challenge. If we succeed, then the lesson learned is very simple. If Indonesia succeeds, there should be no other excuse of others not following suit. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.